So how has the Wellbeing Budget gone down outside the beehive? Well, Chris Simpson is the CEO of Waikato Chamber of Commerce and former GM of the National Party. He is with me here in the Auckland studio, along with Shamubeel Eaqub, independent economist and author. Now, unfortunately, Julia Whaipooti, JustSpeak spokesperson and advisor at the Office of the Children's Commissioner, has had her flight delayed because of bad weather, but she has managed to join us from our Wellington studio. Kia ora.
Kia ora
To you
koutou.
all. Can I start with you first, Julia? Can you just give the budget a grade, 1 to 10, 10 being stellar, and sum it up in a couple of lines, your overall impressions?
I'd give it about a 7.5. I feel quite heartened around the symbolism of heading to a wellbeing direction, but it also been backed up with where we're putting putia. 1.9 in mental health is quite a significant boost when I think just 2 years ago the government was going to chuck 1.5 into building $1 billion into building another prison. So I feel really heartened that we're investing in the right end through this budget.
Okay, so 7.5 from you, Julia. Chris, what do you give it?
Oh, a solid 5.
A solid 5?
A solid 5. It wasn't transformational in what I was expecting, especially around the OECD measures. So it just seemed like a normal budget as per normal. And if anything, you know, Bill English could probably have delivered this budget.
What about you, Shamubeel?
I'd give it a good 8 out of 10. And the main reason for that is it's the 1 year they can get to do stuff that is actually aligned to what they want to do in terms of the narrative. Because next year it's going to be all about electioneering, right? So it's going to be all around investment in infrastructure and all those other bits and pieces.
So, Julia, you would have heard Chris there saying that he reckons that Bill English could have delivered a budget like this. Was there anything in that told you that this is a wellbeing budget? Could you identify it as being that?
Absolutely. I mean, what I started with, the fact that there's this commitment to mental health, which... So I'm in the Justice Advisory Group. We've travelled around the country and spoken with hundreds of people in the communities, police, judges, victim support workers, whānau, so many people who have called out for mental health support and an investment there in that end. And that what we often see is that prisons have become its own mental health hospital when prisoners' population at any given time is 91% have lifelong mental health diagnosis problems. I see this so positively that given 2 years ago we were going to put $1.5 billion into building a mega prison in New Zealand, and this year's commitment to putting $1.9 billion into mental health. What that looks like is another thing, but I think that's really huge. And I'm from the East Coast as well, and I'm really glad to see that $20 million has been put into Te Tairawhiti to put a mental health facility there when we have double the national suicide rate happening on the East Coast. I see that as a really concrete takeaway. I don't think this could have come under Bill English. I do think this is symbolic, and for my generation, and I think of children and young people coming after me, this is a aspirational with some concrete stuff attached to it at the same time. We're not going to change everything this one budget. There'll be more to watch in next year's budget as well.
Chris, Bill English he championed social investment.
That's right.
So that was kind of investing money at the start of young people's lives to have a better outcome. So is social investment in a wellbeing budget the same thing?
Yeah, it is similar, and he started kicking that around in 2011.
So do you think Labor's just relabelled?
Oh, absolutely, and a little bit less around the metrics, but they've totally relabelled that, and rightly so, because the thinking that's gone into it over the past 5-6 years is important. However, it's also based on OECD metrics as well, so nothing new is here at all. And the way that this government is picking favourites by without the metrics behind it, by choosing to go after the mental health area, means what's missing out? Where are those opportunity costs? So that's the part that's lost.
What do you think the opportunity costs were in this budget? Who missed out that should have got more?
Definitely around infrastructure from the roads of national significance. Okay, so in rural heartland New Zealand, where there's low productivity, we need that kind of investment into infrastructure, into logistics. So coming back to, I have no issue at all putting more money into mental health. Absolutely superb idea. However, we're missing out on increasing productivity within the rural areas. So, ergo, you're missing out on actually helping those communities.
Shamubeel, they chucked a big wodge of cash into arguably infrastructure, into rail. Is that enough so that we don't have to switch the lights out in some towns?
There's quite a lot of infrastructure that's taking place through the NZTA program. So I think you don't want to lose sight of the fact that the previous budget had quite a lot of investment in infrastructure. So the additional investment in QRail, it was well signaled, right? QRail's got big deficits. It needs significant investment to recover from what it had. I'd disagree with one thing that Chris said, that it's the same as the Bill English investment approach. The investment approach was the same idea, but Bill English essentially took from the poor to give to the poor rest. Whereas this budget has essentially gone, we're not going to spend on lots of other things, but we're going to focus spending on the welfare and the needy and vulnerable. I think that's the big difference in this particular budget. It hasn't done much outside of essentially that vulnerable group of New Zealanders. It's been very focused on that one group.
Very targeted spending in your view.
Absolutely. If you look at the list of spending, it's been very focused on things like welfare indexation, which I think is probably the highlight of this particular budget. Because when you have indexation, it's not going to be done away anytime soon.
Okay, so you're talking about the fact that they're going to put up benefits at the same rate that wages increase. So currently, well, could be around 3% each year. So it's going to be a consistent increase. But here's my question to you, Shamubeel, and Julia will probably want to say something on this too. The Children's Commissioner has applauded that, but his great wish was that the baseline benefits be tagged to the average wage in the same way super is, about 66%. But that has not happened. So have they gone far enough?
Well, they haven't gone far enough, and we're not going to catch up from many years of neglect. And this is not political, because New Zealand has essentially been neglecting to look after this very vulnerable group for many decades, right? So if you think about things like welfare payments, it's been indexed to CPI for a long time. So that wedge has grown over a long period of time. The level shift would have been far too expensive. They simply don't have the money to stick to their budget responsibility rules
why not ditch those budget responsibility rules and do what their own welfare advisory group advised them to do?
Because politics is politics.
Julia, the increase, that tagged increase in benefits will put, Grant Robertson was saying, about 17 extra bucks in the pockets of beneficiaries a week. He said enough to maybe buy meat in the groceries. Are you happy with that? Meat in the groceries? Is that what we're aiming for?
Well, I took all what's been said and what Judge Beecroft's obviously said. It's good that they've done something, but it's not enough for the reasons that you've stated. But as Shamubeel said, this is not something that's necessarily can happen in one budget. Not that I want to give them an out. This is something we'll be looking to at the next budget as well, about what might happen to bring up that baseline, because we do need to be. I think that that's something that we haven't gone far enough on, and if we want to make a long-term transformative change. But it is symbolic that they have actually committed to doing this.
They've only got one more guaranteed budget though, Julia, so this is the thing. It's kind of, do you take your chance now, or do you just, wager that you're going to have another crack at it? So how long can people who are struggling to put food on the table wait for a transformational change?
Well, from my perspective, I'm incredibly impatient, and I think that things needed to happen much longer ago. I mean, I was born a year when so many reports came out, and I'm in the justice space, so I look at where I see what happens, and I see the reflection in our prison population and the whānau intergenerationally that end up in those spaces. That's a reflection of where we've failed to invest in our social sector, and so right now we've got this indication and commitment to doing things differently. I believe we should be a bit more courageous and should have gone all in, but understand that there are limitations outside of that. But I don't want to give an out on that. I think that is a challenge. But having one budget now, Wellbeing Budget, I understand that you can't create transformation in one budget, but you set the direction and you set the lighthouse for where we want to head to. And I think that this is really symbolic, that they've said this is where we want to go to, and we don't have to have all the answers or all the map right now, but we're going to head in that direction, and we're going to put Pūtea in that direction. I think that that's quite significant.
All right, hold on to your thoughts. We're going to come back to our panel in a second, but the budget was somewhat overshadowed, at least ahead of today, by allegations of hacks and leaks after National got its hands on some information early, and that story was still playing out today. The Finance Minister said he's disappointed at how Treasury handled the breach of its website by the National Party, but it's not for him to say if its head should be sacked. And Simon Bridges claimed his party has been smeared by Treasury and the Finance Minister, and he wants heads to roll. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Usually attention would be solely on the budget, but the day got off to a dramatic start. This morning, Mr Bridges called a media conference to roundly deride the head of Treasury, Gabriel McCloof, and the Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, and called for their resignations. He says the government's been shown to be incompetent.
But it also shows how this government reacts under pressure, and that is deeply dishonestly and with smears on the opposition.
On Tuesday, Treasury said its website had been hacked and referred the matter to the police following the National Party's release of secret budget information. Now it's been revealed National used a simple search function to access the site, and the police have dropped the matter. Mr Bridges says there was nothing illegal or even technical about what his party did.
Any member of the New Zealand public could have done this if they had an interest in the budget, from your grandson to your grandma.
However, many of the questions put to Mr Bridges were about the ethics of National's conduct.
I think it was our duty. It was the right thing to do. And the reason for that is it shows the incompetence of this government.
The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters also stepped it up today, naming a National Party staffer he believed to be responsible in the House. Afterwards, he told reporters he stood by his earlier comments about the accuracy and illegality of National's release.
He had on Tuesday a press statement. Every one of those facts or those statistics in his press statement, apart from one which is rather remote when it comes to the facts, are wrong. So I stand by that. So whatever he was using, he wasn't getting the evidence that he thought he would got. And the second thing is he should never have accessed that. And there's a legal opinion out there now saying that he is wrong in doing that as well.
The Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, says he's disappointed in the way this has been handled.
For me, the main focus this week has been getting on with doing the budget, and, that's what New Zealanders wanted me to do, and that's what I've done. I have expressed my disappointment that Treasury didn't do more to find out about what had happened before they referred this matter to the police, and also I'm disappointed that their system was accessible in this way. Now we've got the State Services Commissioner, Peter Hughes. He will undertake an inquiry and I'll await that.
Mr Robertson says any decision about Gabriel McCloof's future is not for him to decide, but the State Services Commissioner. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
OK, let's go back to our panel now. Chris Simpson, Shamubeel Eaqub and Julia Whaipooti are with us this evening. So, Chris, you first. Did National play this right?
Yeah, absolutely they played it right, because Labour would have done exactly the same if they had the same opportunity.
Prime Minister said she wouldn't.
Oh, of course they would have done exactly the same. That's politics.
Shamubeel? Do you think that this was handled? Did it achieve anything?
Well, it didn't, because the announcements, the stuff that they leaked out was just so boring. It wasn't interesting.
Would it have made a difference if it was a core policy announcement?
Absolutely. I think people would have been really interested and would have stolen the thunder of the budget day.
Well, it did steal the thunder of the budget day, because we're all over the media yesterday and this morning. So it really took a downer on the whole wellbeing budget.
Julia, do you think people, ordinary New Zealanders standing in the queue to pay for their groceries, care less about what happened with the leak and the hack, or call it what you will?
Well, I'll speak from my own experience and probably my generation. I just find this really hoha. It's like, what's the kaupapa here? It's kind of embarrassing that this, I don't care which political party you're in and what happens. And I know, Chris, you say Labour would have done that because that's politics. I think that's an embarrassing level of politicking that I have no interest in.
Agreed.
And I think that is embarrassing, and we need to question our parties to say, don't do that, because we've got my generation looking up, you've got younger generation, we've got a lack of civics education, and you wonder why they don't engage when we've got this theatre show going on that's not actually helping our people, my people, I think, as a young wahine Māori, about the issues that are facing our people, and this takes up so much airtime. I'm really hoha about that, and I don't think we should give it any energy or time.
It's interesting because that Julia, mirrors the feedback that we're getting from some of our viewers. So just one thing on this before we move back to the substance of the budget. Does the Treasury Secretary need to go early, do you think, Chris?
Well, you could hear it in Grant's voice rather than what he was saying, that he is massively annoyed and that somebody's head's got to roll for this, because if you're taking the budget off the front cover the day before, you've just lost all your free, clear air to have a really good conversation about transformation. So somebody's in the gun for this one.
Shamubeel, just on the economy and the numbers, the stuff you love, 2.6% growth forecast. And Simon Bridges was saying today, he scoffed at that and said under National they had 4% growth, that they've basically, they've stuffed up the economy.
Well, as long as Simon's willing to take responsibility for the global financial crisis as well, we'll give him the 4% growth. The thing is, governments are simply not that powerful, and forecasts are just made up things, right? We're just kind of guessing at what's going to happen. 2.5% feels about right, given where the economic cycle is.
You don't think they're being too optimistic with those projections?
It looks about right. That's about the consensus. That's about the average. The outlook for the economy has moderated. There are risks, but I wouldn't say they were overly optimistic.
And this is where Shamubeel's right, because we don't even have the correct census data. So we don't even know what is in our economy from sort of a population perspective and what that looks like.
But they are putting some more money and make sure that you do get the right census data. Julia, whānau ora gets 81 million over 4 years. Is this a big win, given there was so much criticism at last budget that there wasn't anything, there was no increase in whānau ora last time round?
Well, over 4 years, that's $20 million a year. And I think about how in every area, when we're talking about child wellbeing, or we're talking about mental health, we're talking about justice, we're talking about education, how Māori are consistently failed by those systems. And is that enough? I would say in a tagged pool, definitely not. But what I would say, and the challenge is that with all the core funding that is going anywhere, half of that putia should be focused on working with Māori and taking a whānau ora approach, because that's how we need to be changing, I suppose, the experiences and outcomes that for Māori. So it's a tagged small pool, but that doesn't negate that the other pools of funding don't have to work with Māori and don't have to actually hand some power over. That means handing money over to hapuniwi and within different communities. I'll say East Coast because that's where I'm from, to look after their people in those places. So yes and no. No, it's not enough. Well, I'd probably say
but that. A good start again. So I'm wondering, Shamubeel, there was National was saying this is Winston Peters' budget, and there did appear to be a few things in there that were to appease coalition interests. Is it Winston's budget?
Not really. If you look at the significant focus on essentially the vulnerable and the very targeted nature of welfare payments, child poverty, mental health, those are things that this government has been talking about, this party has been talking about for quite a long time. And also, I think, areas that we know are big gaps for New Zealand, accumulated gaps, right? So I think this budget was very much focused on that. It didn't have a lot around, like last budget, around the Provincial Growth Fund or farmers or business. So I think that's coming next year. I think Winston's chance is really going to be next year, and it wasn't this budget.
It's totally New Zealand First budget next year, because it has to be, because they need to have the coalition support.
You don't think Labour has paid its dues
yet?
No,
not yet, because next year's election year, and if New Zealand First supports them around the threes, you have to get it up. So they have to be given some sort of, opportunity to get out there and say, hey, we delivered on this.
And the PGF hasn't been spent. That's when it's going to be spent on infrastructure projects of large scale.
Totally.
All right, we're almost out of time, but I'm going to whip around to all of you. I want you to give this budget a name or a summary. You've got about 6 words. Julia, putting it on you first. Sum it up. Give it a name or a feeling.
Hope and opportunity for transformation, but we'll see what that looks like in the coming years.
Shamubeel?
I'd call it a budget that tried to deliver on kindness. It went some way, but it didn't go far enough.
Chris, last words to you.
Steady as she goes.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. That's our panel. Chris Simpson, Shamubeel Eaqub and Julia Whaipooti. Thank you for being with us this evening on Budget Day. Don't forget you can catch up on all our stories online. Morning Report will have more coverage and analysis tomorrow morning if you haven't had your fill yet. But we do appreciate you being with us. We will be back tomorrow.